Sean, always good, man, to do an AMA. How you doing, man?
Yes, sir. Doing well. How are you?
Good. We talked about this last time we spoke, and you mentioned it even earlier today. Busy, chaos, but I think you and I are cut from that same cloth, and that's just kind of how we operate. It's not necessarily a negative thing if we're busy and chaotic.
It's, I think it's how most people should be if you're really trying to push yourself to do anything, right? Because you have something constantly on the horizon that you're moving towards. And so that keeps you busy. One of my little peeves, I shouldn't say a peeve, but I guess when like you ask somebody, hey, how's it going? Or what's going on? And they say, oh, not much. I'm like, wait, what? Like, how do you
Yeah,
say not much? I just don't get that. Right.
totally.
Yeah.
I've been trying to be more intentional when people ask that question and to be maybe brutally authentic and say stressed out or things are doing great or busy but not too busy, need to, and I'll provide explanation versus just good. Or even the opposite, where I think that we just say busy and then everyone just latches on to like, yes, busy is good. And it's like, well, maybe I should be sharing like productive. I'm really productive, getting a lot of stuff done, feeling good about progress versus just saying busy. Because let's be frank, I'm sure we both know individuals that are busy, but yet progressing in zero ways in their career or their family. And so I hate to perpetuate that idea that busy by itself is, or busy in itself is good.
Yeah.
But all right, well, let's fill some questions. So Ryan made a post on our Facebook group. To join us on Facebook, go to facebook.com/group/order of man. That is where, like I said, that's where we'll be fielding our questions today. We also ask for questions within the Iron Council, our exclusive brotherhood, as well as Ryan may ask for questions on social media. So if you're not following him there, go to @RyanMickler, whether it's Instagram or Twitter. Let's jump into it. Jay Denmark. When is it appropriate time to call someone out on their bullshit, whether it's a family member who complains all the time but doesn't do anything to fix their problems, or a coworker who doesn't pull their weight in a task? I know to try to do it in a kind but stern way. Do I wait for it to have a personal effect on my life or my wife's? Or do I just ignore what they are going on and stay humble and influential so I can persuade them to ask for my advice? So kind of what that balance of lighthouse versus when do you step in and actually just say something?
I think part of knowing what to do is also knowing what not to do. And I think first and foremost, never, ever do it in a group setting. That's
Good call.
Just one of the worst things you could ever do is call someone out in front of a bunch of other people. And then as far as when, I think it's most appropriate when you can find downtime and in a place where they don't feel like they're being attacked or whatever else, and just say, hey, do you have 5 minutes we can talk? And that's how I've approached it with stuff like that. Like, hey, one of the last ones was my brother was posting some stuff that I saw, and it was really complaining, and then also almost like dark, and maybe he was trying to prove a point politically or something like that, but it was pretty inappropriate. And so I called him and I'm like, hey, just a heads up, just from the outside looking in, number one, is everything okay? And he's like, oh yeah, everything's fine. Why? And I'm like, well, because it didn't seem like it from what you said. And I'm seeing more and more of that lately. And it seems to become a pattern. And you might not think much of it, but as an employer, as somebody else from the outside looking in, this is how they could perceive it. And it doesn't make you look good, man. It makes you look like you're a complainer, like you're not productive, that you're going down these rabbit holes and wasting a bunch of time. And who knows what time a day you're doing it. You could be at work doing it. I don't know, but here's what it looks like. And so just wanted you to know, because I care about you, and, wanted to make sure everything's all right. And whether you realized it or not, which is probably what's happening. And so I kind of took the approach of, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. and here's what it looks like. And because I care about you, here's why I'm having the conversation. And he was like, yeah, you know what? I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm not, and I wasn't meaning that. And I can see how it comes off this way, and I'll tone it down. And that was it. You know, it was pretty basic, but that could have also gone very bad if I was like, you know, hey, dumbass, stop posting all these inappropriate things, right?
Well, and Sean, I'm assuming you have an established relationship with your brother.
Yeah.
So he probably respects your opinion. You guys have a good relationship, and this isn't just out of nowhere, like, let me coach you and tell you what you're doing wrong. He probably appreciates you bringing that to his attention.
Yeah. And maybe, and here's the thing. I didn't know if he was in a bad place. So I don't know how he's going to take it when I approach him, even though we have that established relationship. But I think that's where this question came from, because it is someone you care about. You don't want to hurt their feelings. You don't want it to become an uncomfortable thing for, you know, in some families, it could be years that people are pissed at each other because of a bad conversation. But
Yeah.
I think it's important that you have to remind them as you're speaking that there's care and concern, and that's why you're calling them out, and take it from a compassionate viewpoint instead of kind of a hard line, which I think a lot of men especially do, is they take more of a hard line, like, dude, that thing you did was stupid.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, what's your approach?
Well, I think I totally agree with you. I wouldn't disagree on anything. I do want to call out something, though, that Jade, he used two different examples: a family member who's complaining all the time versus a coworker that's not pulling their weight. And his question is kind of like, when do I step in and say something? The coworker not pulling their weight, you say something right away. You're affected by that coworker. That affects the team. It's affecting your day-to-day. That's something that you just don't pull off. Now, a family member complaining, you can kind of see how someone complaining within the family necessarily isn't affecting you from day to day. It might affect you mentally because you choose to get pissed off about it, right? But it's not affecting a scenario. And if it is, then it's even more pressing to actually communicate something. So the win is if it's causing disruption and cohesiveness on the team, if it's affecting your family, then you say something. You don't delay this. So I think we're in agreement there. Then it kind of goes back to what you're saying, Sean, is, well, then how do you do this? And what I'm hearing from what you're saying and kind of my thoughts about this is, you are in zero position to correct anybody if you don't have an established relationship. Otherwise, you're just noise. Who gives a shit what you think if they know that you don't care? So first, you have to ask yourselves, are you in a position of influence? And if you are, then say something. If you're not, get in a position of influence and establish a relationship first. And it has to be genuine, and it can't be from a position of, well, let me get a relationship with this person, so then that way I can try to change them. It needs to be authentic. We're all humans. We know, when someone actually cares versus if they're trying to play you. So don't be that individual and try to have an opinion on your heels about how everyone should be different, but you actually genuinely don't care. So make sure that you're in a position of influence. And then I say you can execute. And I like some of those tips, Sean. One, don't do it in a public setting. Remind them. What other things did you say? Remind them that it's coming from a position of caring.
Yeah.
Reiterate that as part of the conversation. And then also what I heard that you said is, like, have some empathy. You don't know the scenario. One thing I love to latch onto, and I have to remind myself of this whenever I get triggered by certainly a family member, is I always think in my mind, I would do what they would do. I would do exactly what they do if I were them and I was raised the way they were raised. So who am I to be telling you, Sean, that you should be acting differently? When reality is, if I were you and I was raised the same way, I'd probably do the same thing. So we need to approach it from a position of empathy. And I really love what you said is, reiterate the caring, but But I'll even use an example, something that Ryan and I have had these conversations where he had to have a call with me to correct me about something. And I'll just share it. In the early days when we did the podcast, I had a tendency to say right at the end of every sentence. I'd say, this is what they should do, right? And it's a really bad habit. It's something that I have to constantly work on. And the way he said that to me wasn't, Kip, you keep saying this and you sound like a dumbass. What he said was, by saying this phrase at the end of your sentence, it takes away from the effectiveness of what you're trying to say, and it might derail people in listening to you. Whoa, way to connect to the actual thing that he's want to serve me about versus just placing a judgment and saying it's right or wrong. Connect to why they should change. Connect to how it's going to serve them better. Anything you'd add to that?
Just one thought was, in the setting as, let's say, as a manager or in a corporate setting, I think it's also how I did with my brother and ask him if everything's okay in his personal life. There's too many corporate environments where they literally tell you not to mix family and work and all that stuff. So they're basically asking you to be bipolar, like you're not going to think about your family problems while you're at work. So if it's okay, I think, to, instead of having a boundary, if you don't talk about that stuff, ask. Because if, let's say they have, oh man, this is happening at home and it's because I don't have enough time. If I just had an extra hour or two a week and I'm trying to figure that out, you say, well, look, you're not getting this done here. Instead of, maybe you're distracted, but how about, what if I give you a one day each week where you cut out early, and that gives you the time to go do that, but you need to get this stuff done, the stuff that you're dropping the ball on. What if we can make that kind of agreement, and that'll help you do that, and then you don't have to worry about it as much, and then it's a win-win, right? So maybe just by asking, you find some things that they're going to appreciate and love, and then maybe they start picking that stuff up. But again, it shows that you care, not just that it's too rigid.
I love it, man. It's so important. And so often we play that game of like, oh, personal life versus work. Dude, one of the most ineffective times in my life from an employment perspective is when I got divorced. Of course it affects your work. And of course your work affects your family life.
Yeah.
And an ideal employer is one that gets that and allows you the flexibility to manage what's most important, and realizing that it's not going to be work sometimes, and that they may need to bail out early to address some family issues, that they may need some coverage, and that's okay. That's life. That's so important. Since you brought up the whole corporate thing, the only other thing I'd add too about this is ask why they're not pulling their weight. Like, it could be a personal issue, but it could also mean that task, Sean, that I'm supposed to be doing, it's a waste of time. I'm not bought into it. I don't even see the value of it, right? And encourage the conversation. So when employees aren't bought into a task or they don't see the purpose of it, it's your job to actually communicate the purpose of it so they can see the strategic need for them to do something. And if you can't explain it well enough, then you should be questioning yourself of, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Maybe it is a waste of time. And maybe we should be challenging what we're doing if our employees aren't bought in and see the vision and the purpose of what we're asking them to do.
Yeah. Or maybe they don't think it's a waste of time. They just don't completely know how to carry it out, but they're too afraid to ask.
Totally. Yeah. Incompetence, not from a negative perspective, but yeah, I don't have the skill set. So I feel overwhelmed, or I don't know what to do.
Or they're missing a part. So they get it, but that one part's getting them hung up, and they don't want to sound stupid or feel stupid. So they're afraid to ask, and just finding that part would, maybe save them hours.
Totally. All right, Jade, we beat that one up for you pretty good. William Caleb Hare: best way to help and encourage the wife into healthy eating habits and consistent working out. It seems, however, much encouragement and support I give her is always complaining and critiquing herself to me, to which I compliment. and say she's beautiful. But it seems that even when I'm compliment, I call her beautiful, she doesn't take it to heart. Thanks for all that you do.
Oh, this is such a hard one. I think there's got to be a balance of, number one, you doing it, because there's no way, if you're not working out, eating right, kind of filling your house with the things that are more healthy and then vice versa, it's going to be hard to convince her to be doing it. And so sometimes maybe you take on some of the shopping or whatever it may be. Start doing Instacart where stuff, only certain things show up. I don't know. Everybody's dynamic in their house is different in that way. But I think if you start putting things in your home that are healthier, you start working out on some sort of consistent schedule, that's your best chance of her wanting to incorporate with you, and then you just ask, hey, you want to work out with me? Hey, I'm going to work out. You want to do this with me? You want to go on a walk? You want to, so you can incorporate active things that you do together, that make it seem less like working out, I guess you could say. And then just getting the body moving gets you to want to move it more. So maybe that's a good starting place. I would also find the balance of being honest and walking on eggshells and just complimenting for the sake of complimenting, because they could get mad at you for overdoing that too, kind of overcooking it and saying, oh, you always say I look good. And so, or that these jeans look good or whatever. So I think you have to almost like tally the times when you're honest, when you say, you know what, that doesn't look good with that shirt or whatever, and kind of store that in a memory bank. So if they say, oh yeah, but you always say that, be like, no, the other day I told you this didn't look good and that, and you do look good. And then maybe the last thing I could think of is ask, like, well, how do you feel? If you feel bad, then I could tell you look great all day long, but what do you feel bad about? And what are some ways we can maybe remedy that? That's all I got. It's
No,
such a hard
I think that's solid,
question.
man. The only thing that comes to mind is I think there's a difference between me living healthy and going to the gym and getting after it versus being inspired about living healthy. I think it shows up a little bit different. There's a level of excitement in regards to what I'm doing. And, oh, honey, I learned this, and I adjusted my diet and it's working this way. And from a leadership development perspective, one of the key pillars that I talk about is to be inspiring. You have to be inspired. You have to be passionate about it. Otherwise, you're in zero position to inspire anybody else. And so I would make sure that you're inspired about living a healthy life, that you're not just grinding through it. An analogy that my wife uses sometimes is like, I could get tons of shit done and be highly successful in life, but if I'm doing it in a way that I'm not happy, then who wants to follow me?
Yeah.
My kids don't go, dad's pissed off all the time and he got so much done in life, I want to be like him. No, they want to see me get those things done, but also be enjoying life, to be happy, to be joyful, and to be fulfilled and excited about what I'm doing. That is inspiring. So make sure that you're just not grinding through and miserable, because everyone who's going to look at you doing that, they're like, shit, I don't want any part of that. That doesn't look fun. And so try to make sure that you're showing up in a powerful, inspired way.
Well, that's, one, as you say that too, it made me think like some, especially men, they're on a regimen where they go work out at this time. I go to the gym. I have this routine. I'm following whatever it is. And in that, if we want our wives to do that, you tell them to come with you. That might not be the most productive way to do it, because maybe they don't want to go to the gym. Maybe they don't want to get into a routine. Maybe they don't even like being at the gym. So sometimes we have to take away the way we would rather do it if we want to incorporate it with them, or maybe we miss one of those days at the gym to go walk with them or do something that's more conducive to their growth or their being inspired to do more. So it's kind of like that give and take. We can't always have it our way. So as you say that, that's what I thought of is in that a lot of the time we have to do it a different way. And maybe we don't feel like we're going to hit our specific goals by doing it that way. Or maybe you just have to add it at different times, or, make up for it different times at the gym. But either way, it's maybe sometimes doing it, in a way, like kind of just sucking it up and biting the bullet, for lack of a better word, and going and doing it a way that they're going to be inspired by.
I have the perfect example of this. If I went to my wife, Asia, and said, let's work out at the gym together and lift weights, she would say no. Because I'm pissy. I put my hat down low. I turn my headphones on. I don't talk to people. In fact, people have reached out to her like, is everything okay with Kip? He's really angry. Because that's how I work out. I don't like talking to people. I'm like, leave me alone when I'm at the gym. However, if I called her up and said, hey, let's go running, she would do it in a second. And here's the kicker. She hates running. But what she loves about running is her and I talk the entire time. It's her way of connecting and us hashing through whatever's on our minds. So she'll go run with me anytime because she knows it comes with this other benefit of chatting and working through and connecting with one another. So to your point, you might need to adjust. You might need to do some yoga once a week, or you might need to go play pickleball or tennis or something else that not just she might be more connected to from a physical perspective, but has other byproduct and benefit above and beyond just working out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Ben Phelps, how do you overcome discouragement? How do you overcome discouragement?
Oh,
What's in the root of discouragement? What is that? I'm just thinking out loud here. To say one is discouraged, is that thinking the loss of hope and the inability to believe that one could overcome something, or that the sun's not going to rise in the morning? Is it bigger than that? The lack of confidence.
I have a story on discouragement, because I think it's Satan's number one weapon. Because if he can discourage a husband, in the love for his wife, he could get him to cheat. If he could discourage, somebody in their job, they could get them to not succeed. If you can discourage anybody in thinking they can lose weight, that stops us from
not
most
possible.
things. Yeah. And so it's that little voice that says, you can't do that, or you've never been able to do that, or, here's more proof that you're a loser, and whatever it is, where they're not. So the way to overcome that is to have hope and faith in something. So whatever that is understanding that failure is only failure when you quit, and whatever you need to do to embed that in your psyche, which is different for everybody, I think is important. And so, for me, it made a big difference when I started going to church. I didn't really start going to church until I was in my mid-20s. And before that, I was pretty good on kind of setting goals and setting my mind to things. And anytime I had something I was pushing for, I got there, even though I never got there the way I wanted to. There's a lot of failures and stumbling on the way, but just wanting something bad enough kept me moving towards it. And then once I gained an eternal perspective in that and going to church, then it gave me hope in all things. Like,
Mhm.
and then reading autobiography. I got heavy for a while into autobiographies of successful people and different things. And I started realizing like the people that had done the greatest things in their lives have also come across the greatest challenges. And my challenges I was facing were nowhere near as bad as theirs. And so if they could go through that, I could get through this. I just have to know what I'm pushing for like they did. And so that helped keep me encouraged. And so I think the more positive things you can feed your brain, and stories of people who've overcome and gotten through difficulties and stuff like that, I think that's helpful, because now you're comparing yourself to other failures, and then realizing, you know what, this one's not so bad. I just need to keep going. And so that for me has been helpful. But
Let me run this idea
know,
by you.
beyond that,
I got two interesting thoughts. And I totally have not fleshed this out. So you guys are getting me like my mind, the hamster's running around here. And I want to think through this. I think there's a little bit of discouragement that is rooted in the idea that circumstance will generate happiness.
For sure.
And then tied to that is the idea that how we show up despite circumstances is what we should be focused on. Do you get what I'm saying?
I totally
we
get it.
Look at difficult circumstances and we go, oh, I feel discouraged, whatever. Because why? Because we make the circumstance wrong and I have these expectations and it shouldn't be difficult and I shouldn't have to deal with this and I can't. When in reality, success, joy, and fulfillment is not about changing the circumstance or where we're going to end up as much as it is about how we show up in spite of the circumstance. When I think about the most powerful people in my life and people that have influenced me, they showed up in a powerful way. And what was inspirational is not the end result, it's how they showed up during the difficulty, how they pushed through the grind, how they lived their life, how they were being as a person in the moment, not necessarily the finish line or the result or the money and all those other things that, as you know, and I know many other guys know, that's not happiness. It's nice, don't get me wrong. But if we're changing our circumstances, thinking that, oh, well, once I get past this hardship, then I'll be happy, you're a damn fool. And it's not going to work out. And you're going to keep chasing something and it's never going to be good enough.
I have no better way to say this, but, for me being a believer and having faith in Jesus Christ and the atonement, what that did for me, and that I have a heavenly Father that has a plan for me, that is positive, and that it's to be like him. It also reminds me that any encouraging thoughts that I have come from him. That's the Holy Ghost reminding me that I have greatness, that I'm built in the image of my Father in heaven. And any
that
discouragement
gives you hope.
That gives me hope.
Is that giving you hope? Yeah.
And that all discouraging thoughts come from the adversary. And so just having that base understanding and knowledge leads me to, when I have discouraging thoughts, I know where it's coming from. And so that helps me to not dwell too much on it, and then, search for the Spirit to guide me more, or to gain encouragement or find encouragement, whatever it is. And then second to that is, I think we also have to build an expectation in ourselves that anything that we try to do, and especially if we're trying to do something great, it's gonna suck along the way. I think there's too many expectations. Like, look at with Instagram and Facebook and all these things, it's caused so much more depression in people because they look at everyone on Instagram living their best life, and they make it sound like it's all so easy, or that it just came naturally, or that it's, but we don't hear anybody complaining or the discouragement they face or what they had to overcome or how hard it was. And so sometimes we also need to remind ourselves, I told you before we got started that we're filling the barn with all these giant, like, encouraging things. Like, I have these giant, like, 4 foot by 6 foot canvases with just phrases on them. And one of them is that nothing worth having comes easy, is one of the big things. And, so that's every day I'm going to look at that and be reminded, so that anytime life gets hard, it's a reminder, like, hey, you knew this was coming.
This too shall pass, right?
Yeah. So I think too many people expect things to be easier than they are before they go into them. And so when it gets hard, they get discouraged. Where if you tell yourself going into it that there's going to be a lot of parts that suck to this.
Yeah.
And so that when you get there, you expected it. Again, it's not going to make it easier, but at least you don't quit, hopefully.
Totally.
With that expectation. So maybe adjusting your expectations and things.
And maybe one way to adjust your expectation is finish the thought. Far too often on expectations, we'll say, and I'll hopefully, well, my wife never listens to podcasts anyway, so it's okay that I could use her as an example. But I have expectations. We all have expectations, right? And it's ironic. And I did this at the main event last year. I did maybe the year before, around relationships, around the connection quadrant of the battle plan. And I said, everyone raise your hand if you feel that if your wife did 5 things differently, that you would have a happier marriage. How many hands do you think went up?
All of them.
All of them, right? We have these expectations that think, oh man, if she just did this, this, and this, our marriage would be better. Now, that's a whole other conversation. I would argue that that's a lie, but let's just assume that we have these 5 expectations. The point is, we never finish the thought to the conclusion. We go, oh yeah, she should do this, or my boss should do this, or my coworker should, and then we stop and we just hold on to the fact that it's not, that it's wrong or they're wrong, and it's not the way we think it should be. And then we just stop there, and then we fail to deal in reality. Here's the reality. Your wife, and I'll just vent on you guys, my wife is not going to always take clothes out of the dryer and put them away right away. The reality of it is, she's going to put that shit into the dryer. It's going to sit there for 2 days. She's going to plop it, make a pile on the couch, and that shit's going to sit there for another 3 days. That is reality. So I can hold on to the reason why it shouldn't be that way and how it'd be better all I want. But it's so much more powerful to go, yes, what? It's not that way. And she's going to do it the way she did it. So what am I going to do about it? Is it worth fighting about? Is it worth arguing about? Is there a conversation to be had? Or do I just need to suck it up and say, you know what? It's not that important to me, and move on. But we fail to finish that thought to a conclusion on most expectations. We'll just end it with, it shouldn't be this way, period. And then we'll just drag that shit along with us whenever we want about how it shouldn't be this way. My marriage would be better if she just did these things, and et cetera. Versus, guess what? You need to accept her exactly the way she is. And now what are you going to do about it? Kevin
awesome.
Cassidy. It is awesome. In fact, you should put, like a picture of me saying something in your barn. Like, I'm thinking, like,
with the quote.
I'll make you a poster.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying, I mean, and I don't want to beat this one up, but I also thought, like, it's the same thing applies at work, right? Well, Larry's not pulling his weight and he's not doing this. And whatever,
What are you
you
gonna
know,
do?
and that has the same effect, right? It was, yeah, that was really good.
All right, Kevin Cassidy, how do you take notes when listening to something without losing track of what was being said and presented? This is actually a really good question because I have this problem. Do you have a note-taking system, a style of writing? How do you write fast enough to still keep it readable? I'm going to add to Kevin's question. Kevin, I'm going to steal your question and add my questions to this. So all the time I'll be listening to a book or a podcast and something is said that is solid. And I'm like, I need to write that down and I need to ponder about it, but I'm driving my car. I'm in the middle of a workout. I'm mowing the lawn. I'm listening while doing something mundane. And I have this stupid habit of like, I'll hit the little bookmark and Audible, thinking that later today I'll go back and view the bookmark, and then write it down, which never happens. So I'm actually really interested, Sean, if you have some advice here.
I'm an avid note taker. So, but not with podcasts and things like that, if I'm being totally honest. But I've been to who knows how many hundreds of events in the last 23 years where I have, those Mead 5-star notebooks,
Yeah.
like the 5 subject ones, the big thick ones. I have probably 20 something of those filled up with notes from different events, different things. And I've always been really good at taking notes, but we were just talking about expectations. I think when you're at anything, you can't expect to get everything, but you can expect to get what you need. And so the most important thing is that as you're
Don't
listening to
document
somebody,
everything, look for the key things instead.
yeah, don't try and get every word. Now, in saying that, to get better at taking notes, one of the things I did was to try and write down word for word what they said when I first started doing it, because that for me was just, it got me writing faster and trying to get everything. And then I could go back through it and find the gems and highlight them and put stars next to them and do that sort of a thing. And then it evolved into, okay, now it got me writing faster and paying closer attention where I wasn't distracted by people walking around or whatever it was, where I'd be listening the entire time for those notes. Then I would hear the most important things. And then those most important things, I say over and over in my head while I'm writing them down to make sure I wrote that down correctly because it was important. And then when I wrote it down word for word, I'd put stars next to it or highlight it on the spot. Now, while I'm doing that, I might have missed the rest of what they were talking about. But if it stood out that much to me to want to write it down, I wanted to make sure that I got it right. It's more important that you do that than get a bunch of kind of half things that don't mean much. And then later on, as I started sitting in things and wanted to be able to articulate these things, the same sort of things well to people, then I would start writing it down for how they said it, how they changed their tonality, how they changed their physiology, stories they even told, so that I could grab those and use those things when I was speaking or when I was trying to relay a message or whatever it was. So it evolved. So I guess my answer is it depends on what stage you're at in the stuff that you're learning and taking notes on. And then it's, I think, most important that you think less of trying to get all the notes than trying to get what you need from whatever you're taking notes on.
I like it. I like it. Well, and I'm wondering if there's some value of trying to recap a session. So maybe listen intently, write down the key things that resonated. And then when you had that break at the end of the session, maybe recap what was the summary of that session, what were the key takeaways, maybe so you could add some filler around the key points just to give them better context, perhaps.
Well, let's say you went to a, I don't know, to a convention or something, right, Kevin, in your industry. And so, which is like IT stuff, correct? Am I right or no? Okay. Yeah. So you go to this IT convention and it's all the best companies in IT kind of telling you some of their secrets.
The problem, this is not a good example because I'd be presenting because I am the best at what I do. So why would I listen to someone else? But
Perfect.
whatever. Go ahead. I'll pretend.
Which, by the way, is when you need to be the most scared about what you do. When you think you know it all, that's when you need to be taking notes instead of standing in the back of the room with your arms crossed. And so when, let's say you're at something and then you say, wow, man, we're not doing that. I'd really like to incorporate that. Right. And so but you're just taking notes and it comes to mind. So maybe you put a little star by it and then you get to the end of that convention. Maybe it's a 2-day or a 3-day thing that you're at, and you've got 20, 30 pages of notes. You need to go through all of those notes, find the stars, find the things maybe that you highlighted, and then ask yourself, why did I highlight that? And then maybe you're going to find 5 or 10 or 12 really big things that could make a huge difference in your company if you started incorporating them yourself. But you can't do all 12. You can't do all 10. You probably can't even do 5 of them immediately. So find the top 3 that would make the most significant difference in your company now. And that night, decide you're going to implement it and have a plan for next Monday morning when you walk in, how you're going to roll this out to the team. And already have a plan of action of how you're going to start incorporating things, because they're going to be the biggest difference makers in what you do. And so I think it's important when you're taking notes on anything that the implementation part, you have to do that after action review of the notes to find the most effective things that you can incorporate to start doing, and then have a plan to start doing them.
Sean, do you intentionally also share your notes as a part of retaining that information?
With who?
Anybody. Yeah, because I've heard that like one of the best ways to remember something is to share what you learned with someone else. Like, do you have any intentionality that you do around that?
I don't personally, unless we're going over it and I say, hey, when we were at this event, so-and-so said this, and I want to start implementing it this way. How do you guys feel about that? So it's maybe in that
it's tied
way
to the after action review and the actions that you're taking, not necessarily just like a blanketed general action that you take.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Cool. All right. Mike Morris, with the battle planner, you've said multiple times to be specific, not set your goals as something like make more money, but set a dollar amount for how much more money you want to make. What's a good example for when there's not something quantifiable about the goal, like improving your relationship with your wife or with God? We get this one quite a bit. In the IC, we do anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that's every battle plan I have has that in a couple of the quadrants. And usually it is spiritual and family. But let's say one of them is you want to be a better father. For me, at one point, it was I didn't want to yell at my kids anymore. And so that was an action plan of catching myself if I yelled at my kids, and then getting myself to stop myself when I wanted to more often. And then I would keep track of how many times I was doing it. And so my first week, or my first 30 days was, okay, I want to be on a weekly basis yelling at them no more than 10 times. And then the 60-day checkpoint was, okay, now it's got to be no more than 5 times a week. And then by 90 days, I wanted it to not be yelling at them anymore. And then I actually got to where by the time I got to my checkpoint that said less than 5 times, I was down to like 1 or 2 a week. And then before I even got to the 90 days, I had stopped yelling at them and catching myself. And so that all was incorporated in being a better father. So you can really quantify everything. So I think it's breaking down, okay, I want to be a better husband. I want to be stronger spiritually. What is quantifiable that I can do to
That would support
become stronger spiritually.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to read scriptures more often. Maybe I need to schedule times daily where I'm reading scripture, whatever it is. So there's always something quantifiable we can do. And it's just finding what's going to move the needle the most for you at that time. Or maybe it's kind of like finding holes in your boat, right? It's you could be the best encourager that you've ever met and saying positive things all the time. But if you're still like getting physical with your children, it doesn't matter how much you encourage them, if there's physicality that's happening. So that hole's still going to sink your ship. So find those things that are going to move the needle the most and fill those holes, I think, and finding a quantifiable way to get there. I don't know if that made sense to you, if you agree, but what would you say?
No, I totally agree. The only thing we see sometimes that guys will do is make it quantifiable, kind of what you're saying. If your priority is to increase your relationship with your spouse, then tell her, one, communicate that you're doing that. And at the end of the quarter, ask her how you did or how's it going, and make that part of your checkpoint. Do a 360-degree feedback with your kids and spouse, and have them rate you. And then all
feedback,
of a sudden,
accountability.
Clear. Yeah.
That's the hard one, right? I bet most guys don't do that.
No. What? And the problem is a little bit of a tangent here. The problem with that is I've held on to this idea over the years that one powerful way to generate accountability is to have an enlistment conversation. Let's just use you and I as an example. I might be, let's say I want to write a book. Now I could keep that shit to myself and start writing a book and not tell Sean. No harm, foul, no big deal, right? But if I go out of my way and say, hey, Sean, dude, I've had this idea, this book that I'm really excited about it, and I share why I'm doing it and the power around what I'm trying to accomplish, and I do it in a way that inspires him, not inspires him to do it, but inspires him like, man, Kip, I'm excited for you. Like I share in a way that you can connect and you're inspired by my inspiration of what I'm about. All of a sudden, things open up. Sean goes, man, I want to help you. I'm excited about this so much. How can I help you? I have this idea. Next week, he's like, oh man, another idea came to my mind. You were seeing that book, and then I was thinking about it, and then, all these other things. And then what are you going to ask me 2 weeks later? How's that going? Because I was all excited for you because you shared in a powerful way. And so all of a sudden, I generate accountability. But most importantly, I generate support by enlisting Sean about what I'm doing. So guys, when it comes to battle plans, when it comes to getting after it in life, whether it's going to the gym, improving your relationship with your family, your kids, your increasing your spirituality, whatever you're working on, the people in your life share in a powerful way so they know what you're working on. They will hold you accountable and they will want to help you. Anybody in my life that is about something and they're getting after it, I want to see them win. I'm excited, and I even get more excited if they share what they're working on. So have that communication and share in a powerful way so they see kind of the art of the possible. They see the goal that you're kind of you're going for, and they can see that possibility for yourself. And what that also does is it kind of goes back to the conversation earlier. What does that do for them? They get inspired. They're like, shit, man, Sean's getting after it. He lost, 10% body fat. He's loving it. He seems more energetic now, all these things. And then they want to do what? Follow your example. But if you just keep that all to yourself, you're shielding your light from shining on the hill.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's part of what I forgot to say in saying that I put that goal in place. Is I sat with my kids and I had the conversation with them that was my goal. for the next 90 days and said, hey, look, as your father, I don't ever want to get physical with you because I grew up with that. And I kind of, told him some stories of things I experienced growing up. And then I said, and I also don't want to yell at you all the time because that's how I was raised. And I don't think that's an appropriate way to raise.
And you
your
might
children.
share a little bit that's a little bit of a natural habit for me. So have some grace, right?
Yeah. So this is going to be a really hard thing for me, but I want to be the dad that doesn't yell at his kids all the time. And I want to enroll you guys in this. So, number one, I'm working on it, but also, I give you permission to call me on it sometimes. And that was hard because they knew I was trying not to yell at them. And then sometimes I would, and every now and then one of them was like, oh, I thought you weren't going to yell at me. And then that got me to that made me even more mad, but it also made me catch it more. And the fact that they were enrolled and they knew I was working on it gave an extra layer of accountability. And even though that made me angry in the moment, it long-term really helped because it also makes you realize that is important, that they do notice, they are paying attention. And now kind of full circle, a couple of years later after doing that, now my boys, becoming teenagers and getting filled with testosterone, or, they're getting quicker to anger and getting more physical with each other. And even with me and my wife, sometimes, they'll push us or whatever. And then it's easier to have the conversation now of, hey, look, remember when I worked on this and was able to do it? And now I'm not physical with you ever. And so because I'm not that way with you, it doesn't give you permission to be that way with anybody. And so it makes the conversation better. And it's not the first time it's coming up. So we've been in these conversations before. They've seen me overcome it, and it's helped the whole dynamic of our family, I think. But I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was one of the most important parts of setting that goal, was enrolling them and having the conversation with them before I set out to do it.
And Sean, what's so powerful about what you said is you gave them the path of change. You're authentic, dad's not perfect, and look at me progress and grow. And that now becomes a possibility for them because they saw you do it. Versus if you never did that, they may have never even connected the dots that was a struggle for you, and they saw you progress. That was only made possible by you probably communicating it. And now they have a path for themselves. So powerful. We should just end here. That was good stuff. All right. Rudy has I don't follow this question actually. So Sean, hopefully this resonates, and because I'm not 100% sure what Rudy's asking here. So Rudy Vanderviver. Yeah, Rudy, I got your name right. Creating a list of priorities in life and using the battle plan, how to implement each new category of priorities. Best way to gauge progress, internal priorities and external priorities, self-development and responsibility. Creating accountability, still an issue for myself, and a lot of people I know maybe touch base with that. There's a lot there, so hopefully maybe you caught it.
A lot of moving parts, but I think our answer to the last question answered most of that. Honestly, I think the majority of it's in there. The only extra thought I had was that I think it's easy, especially as you first start doing your battle plans, there's so much more you need to work on. And not that it becomes less to work on because it evolves into different things, but you're not used to grabbing the most important things. And so I think it's important that you not get overwhelmed with, oh, I have these 20 things I want to work on in this quadrant. It's choosing one, and whether it's the right one or not, you'll figure out within that 90 days. But either way, at the end of 90 days, then you choose another one. So I think it's important to make sure that you're doing one at a time through that process, and whatever you think, again, is going to fill that hole in your boat the most effectively. And then and work on that one more than any other. Keep the list. And then at the end of that 90 days, just working on something is going to help you to realize if that was the most important thing, or if one of those other things on the list is going to be better, or maybe even think of something entirely different that becomes more important. But the most important thing is that you grab one, you run with it, you stay focused on that one for the entire 90 days. And then at the end of it, do your AR and evaluate how effective it was, how much it moved the needle, and then what the next one will be. I think that's where a lot of guys mess up, is they try to do too many things at once. They get impatient. They want it to be now. They want it to be fast. You know, when we talked about that, one of these questions came up about jujitsu a couple of times ago when we did this, and you said you've spent a couple of years focused on just a technique in jujitsu.
Yeah.
And, you know, where most guys, they're like, okay, I got that down now, right? I got the Kimura down. And where you were like, okay, I'm going to literally get to the point where people say the Kitmora is coming because I've worked on it for so long, instead of, I know how to do a basic Kimura. I know how to do a basic guillotine. I know how to do a basic armbar. I know, right? And that deeper dive into one thing is going to be a more effective long-term. And just make sure you stay there for at least the 90 days before going into the next one.
Yeah, I like
Any
it,
other
man.
thoughts?
Echelon Front, Jocko, those guys have a guiding principle called prioritize and execute. So make the list and then execute. And to Sean's point, don't give up too early. And progress is better than over analyzing and never executing. So don't fall into that pitfall.
Said that? Was it Patton's quote? Like,
I don't know.
I don't know. A perfectly executed plan, or a perfectly planned attack, not executed, you know, is never as good as a poor plan well executed. Something like that, along those lines.
Totally. And there's many ways. Like, I think most guys, their vision for themselves ends up kind of being the priority list or the external priority list in regards to the categories of what needs to execute. But you might even just want to make your own lists. And one thing that I've done, and I picked this up from Stephen Covey, I don't know what book, whether it was 7 Habits or What Matters Most, one of those books way back when in college, but he maintained a MTL, a master task list. And the master task list was never had due dates. It was just these things that come in your head that need to get done. And I would suggest maybe identify the roles that you play in life and document the priorities. And maybe they're not in order of priority, but they're just the things that need to get done. And for me, it really helps to look at life from the roles I play and do it from that perspective. So father, husband, son, friend, boss, employee, church member, et cetera, and document out that way, prioritize, then execute against them.
You know, it's kind of what you were talking about in the other question too, and incorporating your spouse or incorporating the people around you and things you're trying to achieve, and ask them, hey, what do you think is going to move the needle most? Maybe I just did this with the same thing with our barn. And I'm going to put a gym in there. And so I go on Sorinex and I start looking at all their things. Oh, this is cool. That's awesome. Oh man. And by the time how awesome I think this is all going to be, I'm 18 grand deep.
It costs more. Yeah. I was going to say it costs more than the barn. Yeah.
Yeah. For stuff that I'm not going to use probably. And so I send it to my trainer, my personal trainer. I'm like, hey, what do you think I should get? And then so we have a conversation and we talk for like an hour of here's what they have, here we have this is, and we started going through it. And now I'm like, I don't know what it is, maybe 3 or 4 grand deep, but all of it is effective. It's all stuff I'm going to use. And he was great because he was asking me the right questions. Well, what are you trying to achieve? Are you going to start powerlifting? Are you trying to become a bodybuilder? Or are you trying to, you know, have effective strength? You know, what are you trying to build here? And talking to him, and what I have coming up hunting wise, what am I going to be doing physically that is important to me? What are the things I'm going to need? But then he also asked, okay, what about the boys? Because they're playing football and they're starting to get into working out and they're wanting to do this. Are you going to like build circuits for you guys to do where you're working out together and you need multiple stations going on simultaneously? What's your thoughts there? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, okay, well, then you might want to add this and this, but I wouldn't do more than that for now. You'll be good with that for at least, the next 4 or 5 years. And so it was good having that input and that feedback. It ended up saving me a bunch of money, got me more focused on what was more important, instead of just the overriding factor of what would look cool when people walked into the barn and what they saw, as opposed to what am I actually going to use? And I wouldn't have landed there without that external feedback.
God. Ben Phelps, I'm going to read your question, Ben, but I think we've already addressed it, unless, Sean, you felt like anything you would add to this question. Discouragement is a positive feedback loop and highly destructive. How do you overcome what has dominated your life for 27 years? I think we pretty much covered discouragement. Ironic, we don't get that question very often, and here we are. We got 2 different people asking about it. Anything else you would add, or do you think we beat that one up pretty good?
No, we beat it up good. The only thing I would say is, like he said, for 27 years, we all give our discouragement the benefit of the fact when it's been with us our whole life. Yeah. So I think get rid of the mantra of, well, it's been this way 27 years.
Yeah. Like even that statement is negative for you.
Yeah. That's up there with, that's just the way I am, or you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And those kinds of things that stunt your growth.
Yeah. I love that. In fact, here you go, Ben. You don't have discouragement for 27 years because every day you've had hope that the next day was going to come. So you've been practicing hope and faith of some sort for your entire life. So maybe look for the areas where you actually are executing against hope and not just discouragement. Kevin JC, I even know this acronym. I suffer from CPTSD. So CPTSD. It's considered a brain injury to some and a disorder to others. My brain was affected by trauma throughout the very important development stages of my childhood. I have fought this battle for over 20 years and 6 have been sober. But that being said, I'm battling with my brain all day long. Unfortunately, I wake up in fight or flight mode and go to sleep in the same mode. My wife is due with our firstborn next month, so pretty much any day. I will be the best father to my son, but what do other dads use to fight the demons in their heads to stay strong for their kids?
Is PTSD, is that childhood PTSD? Is that what CPTSD is?
I don't know. I'll look it up while you're giving some thought to it.
Okay, I'll base it on that, assuming that it is. And 2 things. Number 1, I would sit with a therapist that can help you with childhood trauma, because some of those things, being deep rooted, you can't just work yourself through it most of the time. Not that you can't, but most of the time you're going to need some guidance in overcoming childhood trauma.
Here's your so we were wrong on the C. So complex post-traumatic stress disorder is a condition where you experience some symptoms of PTSD along with some additional symptoms such as difficulty controlling your emotions, feeling very angry or distrustful towards the world. Distrustful towards the world. Okay.
Well, in his question, he kind of linked that to his childhood. So I'd give the same answer. And sitting with the therapist to try and find that deep-rooted childhood trauma, because he might know what it is, but he might not know how to get it out of his brain, or maybe some techniques that are going to help him alleviate some of the anger and other issues that come with that. And then the second side of it that I want to congratulate him on and focus on is the fact that in that question, he stated that he will be the best father for his son. So I think he's already taking the most effective
Connecting, yeah.
steps to getting there, and reminding himself that he will be, because it doesn't mean that he is necessarily today, but maybe it reminds him of, okay, in order for me to be the best father for my son, I can't be quick to anger. I mean, you're never going to get rid of anger all the time, but if that's at the forefront of your mind all the time, you also have to remind yourself and find ways to not be quick to anger, or to suppress it, or to take it out on other things. Maybe you need to go for a walk. Maybe you need to buy a heavy bag. Maybe you need to, maybe working out more is your thing. Maybe, I don't know. For me, it was surfing. You know, when I lived in California, I could go grab if things got really bad, I could go grab my surfboard and go wash it off of me in a couple hours. And so whatever, now it's jujitsu, shooting my bow, whatever, there's things I can do to get rid of that stress. And so, but I know what those are for me, and I know how necessary they are and how much it helps. It's literally, I'm better off. I could have a list of 20 things I need to get done in a day, have just the perfect amount of time to get all those done. But if I find myself getting pissed off and blurting and, you know, reacting to people throughout my day, I'm better off just scratching a few of those things off the list and going and shooting my bow for 45 minutes or something that's going to alleviate that stress for me. And I know myself well enough to move those to the front of the line when I feel those emotions. But again, it's years and years and years of working on it, understanding it, finding why I did things I did because of the way I grew up, some of the trauma I experienced, and then just finding ways to overcome it. And so it sounds to me like he's in a healthy mind frame just because of the fact that he put that sentence in there. But it doesn't mean he doesn't still need help. So I think finding a professional on the deep rooted stuff is an important part of that.
As a shout out for the therapy, what that has done for me is the ability not just to realize what it's coming from, but to also realize that my anger or emotional reaction towards something is not true towards the thing I'm angry about. It's really powerful. It's one thing to be able to say, well, I'm angry all the time because of blah, blah, blah. It's a whole other bag to be triggered to feel anger towards maybe a spouse and be able to hit the pause button and go, wait a second, I'm reacting towards her and what she did unfairly due to trauma as a child, and she doesn't deserve that.
So what's an example of that? But is it just that she doesn't deserve it, or did therapy help you connect that? Oh, that's what used to happen to me, so that's my expectation of how I'm supposed to react here because of that. What's can you connect that a little more?
Here's the deal. Yeah. So it's not true. It's not true.
Like, you don't have to react that way.
Well, no, the meaning that you've created is not true.
Oh,
I would even argue. So, and this, you know, some people may lose their shit over this comment. Even if you've had abuse as a child, you were sexually abused as a child, you have horrible trauma. I'm not saying those things were okay or anything else, but there's a very high probability for most people that the meaning that they associated to that trauma is wrong. They took an event, and as a 10-year-old kid, you interpret it as, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, they don't love me, I'll never be good enough, I can't trust people, blah, blah, blah. And in most cases, when we sit down and analyze that, it's not true. What's true is you got your ass beat. That's what's true. That is reality. Your interpretation of it is that you aren't good enough, that your dad doesn't love you, blah, 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 and all these other things. Now, 30 years later, you're approaching a situation possibly with someone or a spouse, and when they say something, Where are you approaching the circumstance from? From your interpretation of when you were 10. And you're looking for evidence that I am not good enough. I can't trust people and all these other things. And it's not true. It wasn't even true when you're 10, let alone true in what you're projecting to your spouse. And so the value of therapy is, one, rooted in where's that coming from, but also rooting and disconnecting the difference between your perception and reality, and realizing that when that trigger comes up, that it's your perception from when you're younger being projected into the current circumstance. You're taking your past and you're dragging it into the present and into the future. Now,
that makes
here's
way
the
more
deal.
sense. Yeah.
Most people, it's not going to go away, right? So everyone thinks like, oh, it's going to go away and I won't be angry. No, it's never going to go away. However, what can go away, maybe not go away. What you can do is be able to be quicker on the draw and be able to hit the pause and go, wait a second here. Where's this rooted in? Clear it up and then approach the situation appropriately and get that window of time between reaction and resolve shorter and shorter over a period of time. And how powerful is it too, when you can have that conversation with that individual, with your spouse, and you say, hey, I know it's not fair. I know it's not ideal. And I'm sorry. It's actually rooted in this other thing. And I'm totally projecting on you in a negative way. I'm sorry, and own it from a very powerful place. And then they also understand you. And now they can also even help you and have some empathy and understand where those triggers come from. Not from the position that you can be a victim and it's like, oh, woe is me. There's nothing I can do about it. No, you own that shit. You own the perspective that you came up with when you're 10. You're not a victim. And that's the power of this, by the way, of addressing trauma this way, is because who owns the suffering? You do. It's your interpretation that's causing misery in your life, not the actual event. What a powerful way for you to own the way you're seeing the world, even if it was your past, and own it into your relationship. But it's valuable, once again, really kind of what we were saying earlier, Sean, the power of communicating and being clear in your head of what this is and communicating that to those that love and want to support you.
Yeah, I'm glad you elaborated that, because it makes way more sense to me now what you meant by that. But it did make me think of, because he's talking especially about his family dynamic, it's also important to understand what's true for the people that are closest to you in your life. And what I mean by that is, it's important you understand their personalities and how they do things and how they say things, because you could have your spouse say something to you that her meaning was, I'll just use my wife as an example. My wife is like, her personality type, she will say things that seem super rude. Like I would never say something to her that way, but for fear of like her, being pissed at me if I said it that way, because if I said it, I would be saying it to be a jerk. But
not
her
her
personality type, she says it because she's trying to get stuff done. And if she's mean about it, she's trying to get stuff done and she's worried and stressed about it. And so I know that if she's mean about the way she says something to me and something she wants to get done, I can let that roll off my back, because I understand who she is and how she says things. Where most people, I've literally had people around when she gets like that, sometimes they're like, how could you let her talk to you like that? And I'm like, because I understand my wife.
Her.
Like you are thinking about it more than she's thinking about it now. She's not mad at me. She doesn't think I'm an idiot. She doesn't think any of those things. She's just trying to get stuff done, and she's already moved on to the next thing. So if she's not thinking about it, why should I? Right. And so, and by the way, it doesn't matter what someone else thinks about what she said to me, as long as I understand it. And so understanding her in that way was one of the most important parts of our relationship. And I'm glad someone taught us that early on in it. So for him, if he's about to have their first kid, it's really important that he understands his wife in a way that he knows her personality well enough to know the meaning behind how she says things. And then as your kids grow, it's important to know that in them too, because all your kids are going to be different with different personalities, and they're going to say things that you think you should never speak that way to an adult, but their personality type may, their meaning may not be your same meaning. Right. And
Yeah,
so
totally.
that's in your most important relationships. I think it's important that you understand each other well enough to not attach meaning to the way things are being said.
Yeah, it's amazing how much that awareness of self allows you to have empathy for others.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I got 2 rapid fire. These are easy questions, then we'll wrap up. Is that cool?
Yep.
All right, Jay Valentine, considering getting an MBA to advance my career. However, my long-term goal is to be a business owner and be able to spend more time with my wife and kids. Is it worth pursuing the degree for financial and career gains when my goal is to be out of the corporate world in the next 10 years? Or would it actually put me in a better position to run my own business?
I'm going to get some guys pissed at me, especially
Totally.
the guys that are super pro education. I think you're wasting your time. If your actual goal is to start a business of your own, your MBA is not going to help you in that pursuit.
Or if the MBA has courses that you think might be valuable, take the course to learn, but the paper is not going to help you.
To learn that part of building your business. Absolutely. Like I've learned some stuff from guys that have their MBA that they learned in school, but like you said, it was one semester that they learned that. They didn't need to waste all that money and be in debt, everything else to get the MBA to learn that. And so maybe find those pieces. And I think you're better off finding guys who run successful businesses in the field you want to operate in, and open up some mentoring with them, or finding some seminars or things to go to that'll help you in that pursuit. I think your time and money is going to be better spent doing that. Totally. What do you think? Would you?
I agree.
Okay.
I think it's as simple as this. What's the skill set that is required to be highly successful in the industry and the job that you want to create? Start getting the reps. Now, if you think those reps are through education, sure, go to education. But if the reps are not there, then start getting reps. Like, that's probably more important than anything, because it's the tall tale, like, all right, awesome, I have an MBA. Now what? You still don't know anything. You don't have a valuable skill set to market. So figure out how to get this skill set, assuming that it's professional services, or start creating the product now. Don't delay. Now, one thing that some guys will argue is one of the major benefits of an MBA is actually networking around other MBAs. So do keep in mind that as an option, but maybe you do that through another approach. So I wouldn't put too much weight on it. I think we're totally in agreement, Sean.
Yeah. And I wish I had stats to back it up, knowing the number of successful entrepreneurs that have an MBA, opposed to how many don't. That'd be fun to look up.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be interesting. All right. Tim Clemens, thoughts or knowledge / opinion on Krav Maga. Have you done Krav Maga?
I haven't, but I know guys who do it. The only thing I know is it's brutal. I mean, it's like,
Totally.
it's like if you're gonna grapple with someone that's a black belt in Krav Maga, like, expect that they're gonna try and rip your nuts off.
Yeah, totally. That might be a move in Krav Maga, how to rip the nuts. Which is the problem, right? So don't get me wrong, I love Krav Maga. I've done some Krav Maga. I know a lot of people that train in Krav Maga, and it's no different than MMA and other striking sports. The problem is how much practice you can get in. The probability is it's very true. So just hear me out here. You can't practice it full 100%. It's not an option, right? Like, you and I can't go, dude, let's go 100% Krav Maga. Next day, both of us would be losing our nuts, right?
Yeah,
like,
and an eye.
It's not an option. Yeah, like, would be eye gouging, and then we're injured, and then we can't do Krav Maga anymore. And so is there a probability for you to quote unquote learn something, but not feel it and really learn it? Because it's hypothetical pad work, it's hypothetical hooks. Do you get what I'm saying? And so that's the one issue I have with it. The other issue I have with it from a self-defense perspective is this. And I'm stealing this from Jocko. So credit, copyright, blah, 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 Jocko here.
Who as a military guy is saying a lot, because there's a ton of military guys that are super pro Krav Maga because it's effective.
Totally. And one thing that Jocko shared that I love is if you and I are striking from a self-defense perspective, what do? You walk away. That is the proper self-defense move. Is we toe up, you put your hands up, and I go, I'm out, and I run away. That's what you should do in a self-defense perspective. The problem is when you grab me and I can't run away, then we grapple, right? Then I need to address being held. And that's where the grappling arts are superior, because now we're close countered, right? We're close together. Probably striking is very difficult to do when you're being held because you're too close to each other to actually do strikes and kicks. And then all the grappling and the value of being on the ground becomes into play. Now, everyone listening that does Krav Maga goes, oh, Kip, we do Krav Maga grappling. I totally understand that. And that's where I'd add one of the drawbacks is you don't get to fully try it. And that's the only thing that I have a problem with. Now, AKA, would I do Krav Maga and have I done Krav Maga? Yeah, totally awesome. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying those are some opinions and things to consider.
Like it.
Cool. All right, man. Let's wrap up.
Awesome.
We're up on time. So Sean, dude, always a pleasure. Thank you, man. And I'm sure we'll be doing more and more of these as time goes by. A couple call to actions, guys. We filtered the questions from the Facebook group. Join us there, facebook.com/group/orderman. Connect with Mr. Mickler and Orderman on Instagram and Twitter @Ryan Mickler. And the last call to action is the Iron Council. So to learn about the Iron Council, go to orderman.com/Iron Council. All you can do right now is sign up to get notified of when we open it back up. We're going to open it roughly about the 15th of September, and you'll have 2 weeks to join us. And then it's going to close right up because we have cohorts that as part of our onboarding process on a quarterly basis. So if you're interested, get your ducks in a row, get prepared, and get ready to sign up roughly a month from now as we get ready to open that back up. And to get notified, of course, go to orderman.com/Iron Council. And the only last call is, for your Orderman swag, go to store.orderman.com. Any closing remarks, Sean?
No, it's always a pleasure. Glad to be with you guys.
Awesome. So until Friday field notes, take action and become the men you were meant to be.